I guess the president watches your network a little bit, right? Hey, President Trump, my wife and I just released 10 years. Please do the same. Let the American people know how much money you make.
Senator Bernie Sanders trying something new, attacking the president on his home turf, Fox News. A move Trump definitely did not like, tweeting this earlier. So weird to catch crazy Bernie on Fox. Sam Stein can't contain himself. On Fox News. Not surprisingly, Bret Baier in the audience, in quotes for some reason, was so smiley and nice. Very strange. But it's a bet that seems to have paid off. Sanders' event last night was the most watched town hall of the 2020 campaign so far. Taking risks and making splashes like this may be why the senator from Vermont is leading the money race. He raised $18.2 million in the first quarter. Right behind him, Senator Kamala Harris with $12 million. She's emerging as an early favorite among Hollywood donors. The table's back. It seems like they're all taking their own path. That the rules, I think that if they've taken some, I watch this Democratic field and try to understand what did they take from the debacle on the Republican side in 2016. Their lesson seems to be that they can chart their own path. There's not a donor race that there always was. There's not necessarily a media race. I mean, we'd take any one of them. But as you said, Pete Buttigieg just doesn't pass up.
Well, are there 25 different paths? Because there seems like there's going to be 25
you
different
candidates.
You tell me. That's right. You know, and all this, of course, depends on what happens with Joe Biden, because that is the wild card here. When he gets in, if he gets in, how does that affect everyone else? I will say Bernie's been...
What's the answer?
I think he's going to get in. I don't know how.
Who does it hurt?
It could hurt Pete Buttigieg, for all we know.
Could hurt himself.
It could hurt,
he hasn't gotten in the race, and he's certainly not doing very well so far.
I will say the most fascinating thing for me right now, at least, is watching Bernie Sanders navigate this, because in 2016, he was so clearly an insurgent candidate running against an ideal foil in Hillary Clinton, who was the ultimate establishment figure. And now what we've seen this week is he's kind of figuring out what it's like to be a frontrunner and who can he use as a foil. He's gone after the Center for American Progress, very prominent think tank in Washington, D.C., and he's doing this Fox hit, which to me was an interesting strategic choice. His appeal is he can reach these voters, and he's been unapologetic about that. But he's also pissed off a lot of Democratic operatives for elevating a news network that they feel is inherently biased against the Democrats. So once again, we're seeing this tension between Bernie Sanders and the Democratic establishment, institutions and operatives. Whether that is going to burst out into public even more could be a big, big development in this race.
It was striking to watch Senator Sanders on Fox News not use Fox News as a political foil, but making overtures to President Trump's core voters, saying, just hear me out on Medicare for all. Hear me out on my own version of economic populism, not President Trump's version. This was Senator Sanders. Even as Sam said, he's fighting the Democratic establishment on one battlefield. He also has an eye on the general election, thinking as a possible nominee, how could I win back some of those Trump voters to the Democratic side, cast myself as someone who's an outsider like President Trump, just with a different message, instead of going after immigration amid globalization, going after big corporations.
I saw the end where I think he did some of what you're alluding to. At the end, he stood up and he was warmly received. If you're Donald, I tweeted, you could see Donald Trump screaming at the TV, "Get off my lawn!" But he did close with a message about just those things, and he got a resounding, round of applause around what was sort of that overlay between the Trump voter and the Bernie voter in the early 2016. And people forget that for a lot of Trump enthusiasts, Bernie was their second choice, not Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or John Kasich.
And they overlap on the key issue of trade. And President Trump, in essence, stole trade from the Democrats in 2016. And Senator Sanders is saying the working class, everyday Americans who are concerned about the trade deficit, concerned about industrial jobs in the Midwest, they should come home to the Democratic Party and a version of the Democratic Party, democratic socialism, that wants to protect them.
My Twitter feed is full of complaints about not covering some of the other candidates who are taking a different path. Senator Kamala Harris obviously has a very healthy and vibrant campaign. She's raking in cash. She's signing up super surrogates who may be very helpful for her down the road. But can you just talk about the different strategies? If they're not out making announcements, doing interviews, or making news, their campaigns are somewhat opaque to those of us who cover them.
Yeah, just because they're opaque to all of us in D.C. doesn't mean they're opaque to voters on the ground. Some of them are hyper-focused on, say, Iowa or New Hampshire, and are doing things that often don't make the the national media. Some of them are trying to get national media all the time and can't, because the way the press works is they tend to move from one candidate to the other. I would say it's still a long race. Kamala Harris, I'm sure, is going to have her moment. She had a great January. When we get
She had a great launch.
She had a great launch.
Crowd.
When we get to the debates, she's one of the people you would expect if her performance in committee hearings that we've all seen, where she's taken, where she's performed very well on that stage, if that translates to the debate stage, she's going to have her moment, as are some of the other candidates. And so I think, this question of all the different paths, they're all kind of, scratching and clawing for any attention they can get, any dollars they can get, just to kind of have a ticket to be in the race as long as you can. And then when the eyeballs really pay attention to be the one that kind of catches fire.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.